You're watching CBS News' continuing coverage of Showdown in the Gulf. From CBS News headquarters in New York, here is Charles Osgood and Susan Spencer.
And here are the headlines as our coverage continues. Israel considers striking back at Iraq. American warplanes retaliate for the Iraq missile attack on Israel. Baghdad radio predicts a long confrontation in the Gulf. And Allied armor moves north through Kuwait. The Israeli cabinet met this morning to decide whether to retaliate for an Israeli missile attack. At least 8 Scud missiles caused some damage and some minor injuries in Tel Aviv and elsewhere along the Mediterranean coast. They were conventional warheads. They were not chemical weapons, as some had feared they might be. American officials are urging Israeli restraint, fearing that there might be harm to the Gulf coalition. The Israelis haven't said how they will respond.
That, of course, Israel reserves the right to respond in any way it would deem fit, without going at the present time into particulars what the decision of the Israeli government in that respect will be.
Allied planes are now engaged in yet another wave of attacks against Iraq. Some American strikes were in direct retaliation for the attack on Israel. Pictures of the first night of Allied raids show fireworks lighting up the skies over Baghdad. One Western eyewitness says Iraqi anti-aircraft fire was spectacular, but not very effective. Still, a second American plane is now reported downed, and the Italian Air Force is saying that one of its planes is missing, a Tornado fighter bomber with a crew of 2. This morning, Baghdad radio predicts what it calls a long confrontation in the war between what it calls good and evil. And the Pentagon has now identified the first American casualty of the Gulf War. Navy Lieutenant Commander Michael Spiker remains officially listed as missing in action after his F-18 fighter bomber was shot down in the first wave of attacks on Iraq. On the ground in Saudi Arabia, Allied armor and equipment is moving north toward Kuwait. The convoys apparently are moving into position for an assault across the border. Those are the headlines as of this hour.
Now, Charlie, as you said, everybody is waiting to find out what the Israeli cabinet is going to say. Bill McLaughlin is in Tel Aviv. Bill, what can you tell us as of now?
Susan, there's a very tough debate going on right now in the Israeli cabinet. A tough debate about what to do next. You wouldn't be surprised to know that pressure is coming from the right wing, from people like Ariel Sharon and Rafi Eitan, demanding that Israel strike and strike now. But there's a real problem. Prime Minister Shamir is a very practical man, and he understands the difficulties. The difficulty is this, that there is still absolutely no coordination between the United States Air Force Central Command and between the Israeli Air Force. So that means that if Israel launches an attack, for example, on Baghdad, they could easily shoot down U.S. planes, or U.S. planes, or other Allied planes could shoot down Israeli planes, because they do not share the friend or foe signal. That's to say, when you're flying a fighter jet, your radar locks on to another aircraft, and if it's got the right recognition signal, electronic recognition signal, you get a friend sign lighting up. If you don't, you get a foe sign lighting up, and you launch your missiles, you attack.
But Bill,
now the U.S. is putting pressure on Israel not to do anything to keep this coalition together, and the U.S. has told Israel that its planes will be roaming the skies of western Iraq, looking for those elusive, mobile Scud missile launchers. But here's another problem. Even the Israelis couldn't find them, perhaps because some are believed to be hidden.
Well, Bill, is the main point of contention in this debate whether or not the U.S. planes might accidentally shoot down an Israeli plane, or does it have to do with what Israel risks if it attacks on its own?
Well, I think you've just put your finger on it. It's what Israel risks, not if it attacks on its own, but what it doesn't risk. There's real fear here that this attack last night, or this morning rather, was just the beginning. There is real fear here, and David Levy, the foreign minister, has alluded to it, that this was just the curtain raiser, and that tonight Israel will be hit again, and this time with chemical weapons. I repeat, there is real fear in high circles here that Israel will be hit again tonight with more Scud missiles, and this time chemically armed. So that gives them a very good reason to try and preempt. But also gives the U.S. an excellent reason to try to wipe out those missile launchers now.
But that's what the U.S. is in fact doing, is it not?
Trying to do that right now, but it hasn't been done. And that's why this debate, a very tough preemptive debate, is going on inside the Israeli cabinet.
Can you see this debate ending with a decision by Israel not to do anything? As you have described the sense of fear and urgency that exists, the terror of another night like last night, only this time knowing, thinking they know for sure it's coming. Can you see Israel not responding on its own?
Possibly. Although it's very, very tough for the Israelis not to. Possibly, first of all, for the practical reasons, they don't want to get into a situation where they're actually shooting down American aircraft or American aircraft are shooting down Israelis. They don't want to get into that kind of a situation. And they do understand the important nature of the strategic alliance with the United States. But on the other hand, this country has always had a very proud and a very practical tradition of taking care of itself. And if I can go even beyond that, I talked to an Israeli friend here, and he said to me, you've got to understand, he said, historically, it's very, very hard for a Jewish state to put its life in the hands of Gentiles, even though Gentiles, in this case, are Americans and our best allies. Still, it's very hard. The Israelis are wrestling with the problem. If Shamir gets his way, probably Israel will be patient, because he's a very tough, practical guy. He's not at all emotional when it comes to stuff like this. But again, his right wing is being equally tough and demanding that Israel retaliate. It would be domestically a very popular thing to do, although there is a recognition here it could cause the United States tremendous problems and change the whole nature, absolutely radicalize the whole nature of this war.
Bill McLaughlin in Tel Aviv, thank you very much. Charlie?
This is a very complicated equation we have here, this equation that Saddam Hussein is trying to change by launching his attacks against Israel. Here with us to help perhaps, if not solve, at least to make some progress in understanding what the equation is David Aaron, former National Security Advisor in the Carter administration and now CBS News consultant. Where do you start looking? What is the key right now, David?
Well, I think that a lot of the official hand-wringing about the fragility of the coalition may be a little overdone and, in fact, could be counterproductive. I think you have to start from the fact that Syria and Egypt got into this coalition for very important national and security reasons. As far as Hafez al-Assad is concerned, he and Hussein are struggling for the dominance in the Ba'ath movement, an inter-Arab political movement that each of them claims to head a wing of. They're not going to step out of this for some external factor unless it's extremely important and very overriding.
Wouldn't they regard a retaliation by Israel in that category?
I think it depends on the scale and it depends on how proportionate it is. Certainly they knew that this was going to be one of the arrows in Hussein's quiver. And they had to anticipate that something like this could well happen. So I don't think that it would be very good for them politically if they suddenly had to do an about-face and pull out of the coalition. That wouldn't be something that would take place without political costs for both of them either. So I think that as long as we kind of say steady as she goes, as long as the response is proportionate, I think that we shouldn't overblow this thing, because part of the problem, we can make the problem more difficult for Mubarak and Assad if we keep saying this coalition is fragile, this coalition is fragile, any move by the Israelis is going to be terrible. Well, if we think that, it's very difficult for them not to think that. So I think we need to kind of lower the temperature a little bit, at least as far as the official expressions of concern are in Washington.
How about this report today about the high alert of the troops in Jordan and the government moving them closer to the border and all of that? Does that upset you?
I think that is potentially a lot more serious because it's not obvious to me how much control now the king really exerts over the politics of Jordan. There have been lots of discussions about how he might be swept aside. There's enormous pressure from the Palestinians in Jordan. There may be some unhappiness in the army. And it's not clear to me that this couldn't be a far more difficult and disturbing development than these rocket attacks.
Excuse me, Bill McLaughlin in Tel Aviv has some thoughts on all of this. Bill, can you hear us?
Yes, I can, Susan. On the first point, the earlier point, it's true that Israel, for example, could really upset this coalition if it did something like attacking Baghdad, but that's not what the Israelis would probably do. What worries them? They're worried about the practical nature of the hidden missile bases in western Iraq. So if they did anything, it would probably be to search out and destroy mobile missile launchers, or if they can pave it over, as it were, bunkers in western Iraq, which is very far from any population areas and so on. They'd have to fly. It would upset Jordan, because the Israelis would have to overfly Jordan. They would not overfly western Saudi Arabia, because they don't have the friend or foe signal to do that. On the other point, the Israelis are not, I would also like to add, worried about the Jordanian troops on the border. They think the king is doing that because, well, because he's really worried about an Israeli strike on him. He is still, as far as they know, in control of the Bedouin army, which does have a strong British tradition. It's also a very anti-Palestinian army. It's an army that has fought a bloody 2-year-long struggle with the PLO and won it. And the king, as far as we know, still has their loyalty. The main threat coming to Hussein would be assassination or a civil revolt, which this army has already dealt with in the past. But again, the top command of the army, they all come from Bedouin tribes who are all still loyal to the Hashemite family.
David,
thank you, Bill. You were shaking your head a minute ago.
Well, I think all of that's true, and I don't disagree with any of his observations. I'm just concerned about things getting a little out of control, and it seems to me that a ground conflict, even if it's just incidents, artillery, some shooting, what have you, is politically much more difficult for Syria and Egypt to deal with than this kind of an anticipated attack from Iraq. The missile attack is a product of Hussein's character and aggressive behavior. Some kind of incidents growing up between Jordan and Israel is really a new factor that I think politically could be more difficult. And I hope Bill is right. He is right about the friend or foe question.
Thank you very much. And CBS News coverage of Operation Desert Storm continues.
Is someone joining you?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Blind date.
Hi, I'm...
Julie? It's nice to meet you.
Why don't we go someplace else? The service here is kind of unpredictable.
Crisp, clean Dentine. We'll take care of your breath. The rest is up to you.
Someone should talk to you about how much time you spend on the phone, and who you talk to, and when and where. A Sprint representative can easily help you select a savings plan for your personal calling needs. And Sprint has better overall savings than AT&T. So there's a plan that's perfect for you. Unless, of course, you're a teenager.
I can't believe it.
No one's invented the perfect plan for that.
You've heard all about cold relief. Now you're going to hear about hot relief. New Tylenol Cold and Flu. With more medicine than any other hot liquid flu formula. Heat releases the power of this lemony medicine with 3 cold and flu fighters for your coughing, sneezing, and congestion. Plus Tylenol pain reliever for your fever, sore throat, aches, and pains. New Tylenol Cold and Flu. Part of Tylenol's complete cold relief line. Nobody cares for your cold like Tylenol Cold.
Static Cling can make you feel like this. What's your solution? Static Guard. Static Guard eliminates static cling instantly, completely. Get Static Guard. It's your best solution for static cling.
When life's little irritations are everywhere you turn, more people turn to Visine. When eyes need it most, it's the most trusted name for relief. Visine gets the red out and a whole lot more.
Bringing you up to date now on the Mideast situation, here are the headlines. In day 2 of the Persian Gulf conflict, the Israeli cabinet meets deciding whether to strike back at Iraq. This after Scud missiles hit targets in Israel. The U.S.-led Allied air assault continues on Iraq and Kuwait, and world financial markets continue to climb, responding to war news from the Gulf. The Israeli cabinet has been called into an emergency meeting following the Iraqi Scud missile attack. New pictures tonight show the extent of the damage in Tel Aviv, where 5 of at least 8 Scuds hit. Remarkably, there were no deaths and only minor injuries. A CBS News New York Times poll just out indicates strong support among the American people for George Bush's decision to start military action. Overall, the president's approval rating for his handling of the entire Iraqi situation is way up. In Tokyo, meantime, the Nikkei stock average closed Friday, trading up even after word of the Iraqi attack on Israel. Charlie?
Well, we keep hearing from various sources that there are a fairly large-scale movement of men and equipment northward from positions in Saudi Arabia. We're talking about coalition, American and allied forces moving closer to the Kuwaiti border. And of course, this makes everybody wonder what's going to happen. Is there going to be a beginning of the ground phase of all of this? Mark Phillips is at the Pentagon, and we're going to check in with him now. Mark, where do we stand as far as the military situation is concerned?
Well, Charlie, to deal with the question of the troop movements along the ground first, given all of the discussion that has gone on in the weeks even leading up to this U.S. attack of a couple of days ago, it was thought that it would take several days and perhaps even several weeks of aerial bombardment, both of Iraqi positions within Iraq and of their dug-in positions in Kuwait, and even of their mobile positions of Republican guards in the north of Kuwait before any certainly frontal ground attack and even an end-run type ground attack would be attempted. There doesn't seem to have been here at the Pentagon any rethinking of that much-discussed philosophy. Perhaps the ground movement that we have been seeing is more in the line of getting into staging positions rather than an imminent thrust into Kuwait proper, or even end-running around into Iraq, or whatever exactly the plan is. The more pertinent issue, or at least more immediate issue that the Pentagon is now grappling with, is having convinced the Israelis at least to discuss this question of retaliation for the Scud attacks into Israel, just what form that retaliation can effectively take. Presumably ruled out in all of this is any attack on civilian populations. That's not something the U.S. could morally undertake, and would certainly be of questionable value from a public relations point of view. More to the point seems to be just how you do, in fact, find these mobile Scud missile launchers, which the Iraqis were thought to have 37 of prior to this war breakout. Yesterday, Chief of Staff, rather the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Colin Powell, said that the U.S. was confident that it had taken out some of the launchers, but that some still were in operation and still roaming in the western Iraqi desert. That was proven all too graphically with the attack on Israel and the one missile launched towards the Dhahran air base. But the Pentagon official here tonight told me that this is not something that the U.S. considers easily done. Certainly if it was easily done, it would have been done by now. Think, he said, of the western Iraqi desert as a vast ocean of several hundred, literally a sea of several hundred square miles, and think of the mobile launchers as submarines because they behave in very much the same way. They move around at night, coming out of their camouflage bunkers or from under camouflage netting. It takes only about 2 hours to fuel the rockets and send them on their targeted course. By the time the rocket is airborne for 15 minutes, those mobile launchers have scurried out from wherever they were and are back in their protective coverings. They're extremely difficult to find. The Iraqis have also learned various means of avoiding detection. It's presumed that they're doing what armies do all over the place, which is to have dummies, a flatbed truck with a sewer pipe on it, looks a lot like a mobile missile launcher. The U.S. may, in fact, have been hitting dummy models of the Scud launchers and not Scuds themselves. There's no official tally yet on just how many of the real thing may have been hit. In looking for them, what the pilots tried to do is sense any electronic emissions, which is to say radio signals, which the Iraqis would have put out in contact with their central command. The attack on Israel yesterday was clearly a coordinated, simultaneous attack. The missiles came in at about the same time. So there's a lot of area to cover and a lot of area to get to. Not an easy thing done at all, Charlie.
Mark, we'll be getting back to you for more discussion of all of this. We are now well into the second day of the war. We've seen the attack and then the delayed Iraqi response against Israel. Let's take a few minutes right now to look back at what has happened.
Iraqi anti-aircraft gunners probe the sky with trails of tracer bullets.
Baghdad under fire at night. Eerie patterns of light probing the sky. But behind that spectacle of light, there is iron. If you're in one of those planes overhead, you realize that someone is shooting at you. But you have a job to do.
We went in with some very precision bombers. We went in some very heavily defended areas and dropped some excellent bombs.
The Iraqis tried to change the equation of the war by bringing Israel into it, and they did that by aiming Scud missiles at Tel Aviv. No one was killed, although there were injuries. And the half-ton warheads did damage, no question about that. The Israeli instinct was to strike back, but that would have been playing into the hands of Saddam Hussein. One by one, the Iraqi leader has been playing his cards, still talking tough, still trying to show his people that he is not cowed, not ready to throw in the towel yet. But he raged about the man he called the Satan in the White House. Meanwhile, in Washington, President Bush insists there is only one way Saddam Hussein can get off the hook.
We are going to prevail. I don't want to get caught up in some semantics about all of this. Got to get out of Kuwait.
Even the most dedicated of peacemakers would say that now the bombs and bullets are doing the talking.
I think it's a little late for diplomacy. Thank you.
But it is still early in the game, and no one can say how long it all will last. But all pray that it will be as short as possible. We know that war is terrible, and even to our children, the Persian Gulf does not seem that far away.
I'm glad that they're not having the war here, because if they had the war here, we would all be scared. But now it's kind of like, I'm kind of scared that all the kids, some of the children could get killed in Iraq.
Some wisdom from the mouth of a child.
Thank you, Charles. CBS News coverage of Operation Desert Storm continues. With us now from London, we have CBS News correspondent Dan Raviv, who has written several books on the subject of terrorism and those who fight it. Dan, I'd love to get your view at this point on how the attack on Israel might affect Saddam Hussein's standing among terrorists and in general standing in the Arab world.
Well, Saddam Hussein did it to be a hero. He does almost everything to be a hero, to be remembered forever. He wants to be a modern-day Nasser. You remember the president of Egypt? Even though Nasser lost a war, the Six-Day War against Israel, Nasser was a hero. His photo is still on the homes of so many Arabs throughout the Arab world. And as for the terrorist community, well, Saddam Hussein wants to go well beyond that. He wants to be the leading power in the entire Arab world. And even if he loses this war, even if he has to give up Kuwait, Saddam Hussein probably will be remembered as the Arab leader who stood up to us. And that's something good for him. Of course, it doesn't mean that the war isn't worthwhile, but it does mean that defeating Saddam Hussein is a very difficult task, Susan.
Mm-hmm. There's been an awful lot of concern in this country and in Europe as well with security, with possible terrorist strikes. How does this affect that equation, if at all, and how likely do you think it is that we're going to see a real wave of terrorism in the next few weeks?
I think it's likely that we'll see it, but not necessarily today, tomorrow, or next week, though that could happen. Often what happens in the Middle East is that countries and groups do not react immediately. They choose their own time. Well, one example would be the explosion that destroyed Pan Am Flight 103 over Scotland at the end of 1988. Many intelligence sources believe that that was some sort of response to the U.S. Navy mistakenly shooting down an Iranian Airbus. But that occurred 6 months after the Iranian plane was shot down. The same thing about the question of retaliation today. Will Israel retaliate for last night's Scud missile attacks on Israel? They may not do it today. I think they're quite sure to do it sometime.
Eventually in some form. Forgive my ignorance of the international terrorism community, but I think this is a question that a lot of people have about this. If terrorist attacks come in this country and abroad, will they in all likelihood be something that is coordinated from the top by Saddam Hussein? Will this be terrorist groups operating independently, groups that have no relationship with him simply taking advantage of the situation? How is this likely to evolve?
Well, it's a combination, and a most dangerous combination, Susan. Some of the groups are answerable to him. They're actually run by Iraqi intelligence. Others are supporters of Saddam Hussein. And some of the most notorious groups, for instance, the Abu Nidal organization, breakaway factions, that and others from the PLO, the more, well, radical, violent factions, are headquartered in Baghdad these days. They get their money. Whoever pays the money calls the tune. That's the way it works in the terrorism community, and the money right now seems to be coming from Iraq.
Dan, Charlie Osgood here. Saddam Hussein surely has some enemies left in Iraq, although he has eliminated many of them. And the punishment that Iraq is taking now and that its military is going to be taking, is there any possibility there that there might be somebody who would do what German officers tried to do to Hitler toward the end of World War II? Is it possible that somebody might try to eliminate Saddam Hussein,
yes,
one of his own countrymen?
Charlie, there certainly is the possibility. It's something that's been hoped for, especially by intelligence agencies. The word in Israel, for instance, is that Saddam Hussein runs such a thin dictatorship in Iraq that if you could get rid of him, then you'd solve the whole problem. The United States, of course, was faced with its own problem. The CIA cannot legally engage in assassinations. And so the thought was, who could do it? Well, there are Kurdish rebels. There certainly are some disaffected officers in the army. And you're right, during this war, there will be more such officers. But Saddam Hussein tends to find the disaffected ones very early, and they are taken out and shot. And even during a war, during the Iran-Iraq War, some of the most talented generals were executed at Saddam's orders.
But you don't think that this is an impossible scenario? This would certainly, one would think, at least on the surface, solve some problems for us.
I'm sorry to say that it's not likely. Saddam Hussein is successful at remaining at the top in Iraq. He, of course, has done it by brutality. He is clever. He knows how his own system works. I don't think it's likely he'll be overthrown, but it is one of the hopes that we in the West, meaning, of course, the U.S. government and especially its intelligence community, well, they really want it. They certainly do.
Dan, how closely do we know what Saddam Hussein's movements, his personal movements, are? I heard one of the generals explaining that these smart bombs now can come down and find a position in a room within 3 or 4 feet. I mean, if we knew where he was, could he be bombed out of the way?
Well, could be, yes. And, of course, despite the fact that the CIA cannot legally engage in assassination, as was found when the U.S. bombed Tripoli, Libya in April of 1986, when Colonel Gaddafi was certainly a target, airplanes can do it. The Air Force can do it. But spotting Saddam Hussein, he seems to sleep somewhere else every night. He's well underground. He has at least 50 different bunkers. It's not going to be easy to spot him, to find him at any particular moment.
Let me hark back to your experience in Israel and ask you whether or not, you mentioned earlier that you thought that somehow Israel would retaliate, even if it weren't an instantaneous thing, even if the cabinet decides not to right away. Briefly, how do you think this is likely to fall out?
Susan, the way that would work is this. These are the conflicting pressures on Prime Minister Shamir. For his army and for his population, he has to do something. A foreign, an Arab country, hitting Tel Aviv with missiles, he has to do something. But for the United States, he has to do nothing. My scenario, wait till the war is over, then Israel does something against Iraq, and he can tell his people, we did respond. If the Israelis are smart politically, they'll stay on the right side of the United States, and they won't do anything.
Dan Raviv in London, thank you very much. And CBS News coverage continues in just a moment.
watching CBS News' continuing coverage of Showdown in the Gulf. From CBS News headquarters in New York, here is Charles Osgood and Susan Spencer.
And here are the latest headlines. Israel's cabinet debates if and how to respond to the Iraqi missile attack. Allied warplanes continue the assault on Iraq. A second American plane is reported downed in combat. And Iraq predicts a long war in the Gulf. The Israeli cabinet is locked in what is called a tough debate over how to respond to the Iraqi missile attack. At least 8 Scud missiles hit Tel Aviv, Haifa, and other Israeli coastal areas. The missiles were not armed with chemical weapons, as feared, but the blast caused at least 10 injuries and considerable damage. Mayor of Tel Aviv toured his stricken city.
My feeling is, look, I mean, a war is not a summer camp. And to my sorrow, people were wounded. We are taking care of the families, of the babies, of the children. I went to, because the people are now they were concentrated in 2 shelters, in a school and in another place. I went to calm them down, to speak with them, to tell them that we will take care of them. We'll evacuate them from here, we'll give them housing, and we will continue to live and to enjoy life.
In the Saudi Arabian desert, Allied armor and supplies are moving north towards the Kuwaiti border. They are apparently moving into place for a possible assault. And the air war continues. Allied planes again headed for targets in Iraq and Kuwait. A second American plane is said to have been downed, and an Italian Tornado fighter bomber is missing with its 2-man crew.
Bob McEwen is standing by with General Fred Warner, retired General Fred Warner, to take a look at militarily what the Israelis and what we may do next. Sir?
Susan, so far the emphasis in this war has clearly been in the air, on aircraft and the men who fly them. That is presumably about to change to include the ground and to the troops who are on the verge of facing the enemy there.
Well, I wonder, I say to myself, is it worth dying for it, you know? I hear a lot of stuff in the news about, you know, people, I don't know if it's false propaganda or whatever, but people don't want us here, and we're just here. As soon as we get the job done, we get out. You know, I don't know if the people are grateful for what we're doing or not, you know.
Anything to speed this up to get us home sooner is fine with me. I don't feel good about going to war, but I'm glad it started. I'm glad it's finally getting on with it. That way we can do what we got to do and get out of here.
Into the night and through the morning, we have continued to receive reports of men and material moving to and along the border. General Warner, for the troops who are now getting into position or who are in position along the Kuwaiti border, what are they hearing? What are they seeing? What are they feeling right now?
Well, for certain, the adrenaline's pumping, and they're very anxious, even though they recognize the severe danger involved. They're anxious to get on with it. They are afraid, but hopefully, I'm sure with their leadership, they're controlling that fear. It's a responsibility of all those commanders, from General Schwarzkopf right on down to that squad leader, to bring that fear under control and channel it.
Now, you've been in this position. You've been someone who's led men into battle. You have a very similar background to Norman Schwarzkopf. You were with him at West Point at the academy. You were in Vietnam. In fact, you succeeded him as a battalion commander.
Right.
From what you know of that man and the demands on him right now, how is he at the same time trying to keep his men, I presume, relaxed and rested, yet on the other hand, alert and ready?
That's a big challenge for the commander, but it's up to him, because if he doesn't set the example, then it won't get done. First of all, he's pacing himself, making sure that he gets at least the minimum amount of rest to stay alert, to face the challenges that he must. And then he is dividing his time between his staff and his commanders in taking in all the information, all the intelligence flowing to him, and then relating that to the operational requirements and making the decisions.
Now, does he pass that information along to the men? Would they now, for example, know that Iraqi missiles have hit Tel Aviv?
Yes, they would. Not that he would be telling them directly, but the chain of command would be functioning. This flow of information would be coming down from Schwarzkopf to his generals and colonels, and they'd be taking it on down. And my best guess is that the individual soldier has a pretty good idea of what is going on.
When was the last time that American troops were in this position of having been deliberately marched to a point to wait for a major battle such as this?
In this scale, talking about divisions, units of 15,000 men, we really have to go back to World War II for our last example of this type of mass movement, of positioning for a big offensive.
And in terms of the psychology of the troops, how does that differ then from an operation such as Panama or Grenada?
Probably doesn't, for the individual soldier, that infantryman, probably doesn't change a great deal.
It's not harder to sit and wait knowing something is coming rather than to go in and strike?
Yes, the sitting is hard, but for that soldier down there, it's still a very personal thing between him and the enemy. And how big the unit is that he's a part of loses all relationship when it comes down to being ready to go.
What about the other side of the line? From what you can presume, what are the men in Kuwait on the Iraqi side who have seen the B-52s come over, who have experienced the carpet bombing by now? What are they thinking?
Most certainly terror, absolute sheer terror, but it's not going to end with the B-52s, because as we move into the land phase, they are going to be subjected to combat air, close air support for the troops. That means not only the bombing, but also the rocket runs, the machine gun runs, the strafing, and so they have yet to experience the full brunt of battle.
So given, again, what you know and presume about the psychology and training and background of the average Iraqi infantryman, what's the frame of mind there?
Sheer terror, sheer terror. And I would think that he is right now seriously questioning all that he has been told in the past about his invincibility and the weakness of the American forces.
Charles and Susan, gut-wrenching time for all Americans, certainly, and for no one more so than the men and women on the ground in the Gulf. Back to you.
Bob McEwen, General, I want to thank you. The idea of being glad that it started because you're just anxious to get it over with, I think applies not only to those men stationed there in that situation, but also to their families at home. Bob Fall is with us.
Charlie, war reveals the deepest and the truest emotions about a nation, noble as well as base. One way to get a sense of that is to spend a few minutes with a family living through the war, in this case with a father who's proud but worried living at home, and a son on the front lines. His name is Lieutenant Colonel Mike Hostage, age 35, now a fighter pilot on duty in Saudi Arabia. The product of an all-American life, glory on the gridiron, golden moments in the sun, a happy marriage, a smiling wife. Mike Hostage's nickname is Hijack, and while he flies over Baghdad, his father at home outside Boston tries to stay calm.
As Mike describes his job, he is the point of the spear. His job is to be out front in the attack.
Yeah, we were expecting to see air activity, being daylight and such, but I was kind of surprised that there wasn't any.
I said something as we were saying goodbye. I said, "Be careful, and I love you." And he said, "I'll be careful, I love you too, and don't forget that I'm very good at what I do, and I'll be very careful."
Well, I've been training for 13 years for this day. It's like being a professional athlete and never playing a game. Today was the first game, and the enemy didn't show up. The opponent didn't show up. We went out there and ran our first play, and it worked great. Scored a touchdown. There was nobody home.
Unfortunately, it isn't over. It's begun. And for as long as they're there, I'm told he'll fly 2 missions a day. And you just have to worry each day.
Think the war's over? I would not be surprised. If he had a half a brain, he'd quit before we do him any more damage. I would not be surprised at all if it ended quickly.
All the talk of tactics and ordnance, ultimately, war comes down to human terms.
I suppose it's just another sign of our times that there should be somebody whose name is hijack hostage. But
a sign in this case, and the bravado that the son has, if you notice, I guess bravado is the right word, the pride. The father would like to share it, but doesn't at this point. He wants him home.
Well, imagine having your son tell you that his job was to be the point of the spear. And,
the son tried to reassure the father, as I'm sure hundreds, thousands of American sons have done with families, but the words are scant comfort at a time like this, and only when it ends will the worry cease.
The young man's saying that he wouldn't be surprised that if Saddam Hussein didn't throw in the towel, if he had any brains, he would do it. But it reflects something which is being said by the fellows over there and by an awful lot of people at home here, that we really are thinking of this as something that this is going to be a short series, 2, 3, 4, 5 days, something like that. And the Iraq radio and some of the experts looking at this from the outside, perhaps more objectively than any of us can, are saying might not be like that, might last a long time.
No, and it would be fascinating to go back in a week, 2 weeks, perish the thought, a month, and visit with Lieutenant Colonel Hostage's father and with the pilot himself and see how their attitudes change as this thing drags on. They will, obviously. And whether that bravado and that swagger and that pride continue is, it's there now. Will it be in 2 weeks?
It puts the politicians in an interesting dilemma in that whether or not they should seize the moment in a way or try to prepare the public for what's coming so that the reaction later isn't
Do politicians lead or do they follow? And as the peace demonstrations, or call them what you will, grow louder, grow more vocal, larger, do the politicians start jumping on the bandwagon? Do they get out ahead? Do they wait and see? We don't know yet.
Of course, there's always the possibility that Colonel Hostage is right. We heard General Warner describing what the ground action is going to be like. I mean, it may very well be that this is just a question of overwhelming superior force, and in that case, maybe it will go
well, at least at this point, there is no question but that superiority is genuine, but keep in mind this does not address the question of his Iraqi ground forces. That's the $64 question.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Bob. And CBS News coverage continues in just a moment.
This isn't what you think. It's a new kind of cold relief. Introducing fast-acting, better-tasting Tylenol Cold Effervescent. Strong non-aspirin cold relief from Tylenol. The only effervescent cold medicine that speeds 2 cold medicines to your sneezing and congestion while it sends Tylenol pain reliever to your aching body. New orange-flavored Tylenol Cold Effervescent, part of Tylenol's complete cold relief line. Nobody cares for your cold like Tylenol Cold.
When you rinse first with Plax, normal everyday brushing takes on a whole new meaning. Plax, clinically proven to remove more plaque than brushing alone.
All you needed to feel fresh then was baby powder, and it's all you need now. New Playtex Baby Powder Tampons. I like gentle scent. Playtex New Edition Baby Powder Tampons.
It's all you need to feel baby powder fresh. I won't wear anything without Cross Your Heart, because great looks start with Cross Your Heart. With crisscross shaping, I always look better.
The Cross Your Heart bra. Great looks start with Cross Your Heart from Playtex.
The fit that makes the fashion.
You may have noticed that lately lots of people are having considerable trouble walking and chewing gum at the same time. Perhaps it's because of the great new taste of Trident. Original fruit and bubble. New Trident, still good for your teeth, and now it tastes better than ever.
What I know is these people are alive inside.
Awakenings.
Such as there? It's a miracle.
Where are my glasses?
They're on your face.
Golden Globe nominee, Best Actor Robin Williams.
You thought what you'd like to do today?
Everything. Robert De Niro, winner, Best Actor, New York Film Critics. Gene Shalit calls it a stunning motion picture.
People have forgotten what life is all about.
And Joel Siegel says it's a movie you have to see. Robert De Niro, Robin Williams, Awakenings, rated PG-13. Now playing in a theater near you. Check newspapers for locations.
Here are the latest headlines in the Persian Gulf conflict. The Israeli cabinet meets to debate a response to the Iraqi missile attack. At least 8 Scud missiles hit Israel, causing damage but no deaths. So far, Iraq has not used chemical weapons. The U.S. commander of Operation Desert Storm will brief reporters in about 2 hours on the entire situation there. The Israeli cabinet is meeting, called to emergency session following a missile attack by Iraq. At least 8 Scud missiles, armed with conventional, not chemical warheads, struck targets in Israel. 5 of those missiles landed in Tel Aviv, injuring about 10 people, but remarkably causing no deaths. Another Iraqi Scud was fired at U.S. forces in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia. It was shot down by a brand new addition to the U.S. arsenal, the Patriot surface-to-air missile. The streets of Baghdad, meanwhile, appear relatively calm in pictures made available this morning, but the U.S.-led Allied bombing assault continues against targets in Iraq and Kuwait. A British cameraman says he smuggled these pictures out of Baghdad in his pants, showing the spectacular start of U.S. bombing attacks on Wednesday night. And there is word now also that in addition to bombs, U.S. planes are showering Iraqi troops with leaflets, encouraging them to surrender and surrender now. Charlie?
Some of those spectacular pictures, the ones that were taken of Baghdad under a bombing attack, those spectacular pictures were taken and smuggled out, as Susan has just reported. And earlier this morning, Dan Rather spoke with the ITN cameraman who took those pictures. Here's that conversation.
Just tell us straightforwardly, what to you were the most significant things that you saw and heard as that night of battle lighting up the sky droned on?
Well, certainly the battle did light up the skies. The Iraqi ground defense systems, I think, were actually more pretty than effective. It's the first time I've seen a cruise missile land. I mean, it does light up the entire night sky, turn it into daylight. But as I say, the Iraqi defense systems were more pretty than effective.
Nigel Baker, how about you? What were the most impressive things you saw and heard?
Well, I think that one of the main things is that obviously people initially weren't sure how heavy this attack was going to be. A lot of people went to the shelters at first until they knew what was happening. But obviously the cruise missiles were very, very precise. They left most of the town centre, in fact, in Baghdad, intact. And despite an awful amount of anti-aircraft fire, the missiles landing, it looked spectacular at night, but did by obviously what the Americans must regard as a very effective job. Buildings on the ground the following morning could be seen with the backs blown out. One telecommunications building was left a heap of twisted metal, broken glass, bent satellite dishes on the roofs. But astonishingly, across the road, a bus station, people were carrying on life as normal, and the whole area was almost as normal, apart from that one building. And that was I think the thing that sort of had the most impact on me, that you expected to see the following morning a devastated landscape, and what you saw was in fact particularly targeted areas. And despite the spectacular displays the night before, it had been a very surgical operation by the American forces.
Well, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Sorry, the hotel itself that we were filming from is actually smack bang in the middle of a military area, but just 1 kilometre away from it is a military airfield, and the Ministry of Defence, which was hit 3 times, is just about half a kilometre away. So the precision bombing or precision missiling was absolutely spot on.
May I follow up on that? I find this very interesting. I think our audience will as well. There's a great skepticism among Americans and worldwide when someone talks about the precision of the cruise missiles. Everybody says, yeah, but you get in combat, they won't be that precise. I gather by what you saw and what you're saying now that you were struck by the precision of the missiles, that they were on target, and it is entirely possible that civilian casualties were kept down, at least during this attack, because of that.
Well, it's the safest bombing raid I've ever been in. I mean, you don't, in a bombing raid, say in Beirut, you immediately take cover, but it became apparent that they were only going after strategic targets. So if that's anything to go by, we felt safe at that period of time because we knew that they were going for strategic targets.
It's also interesting that beforehand, obviously, there'd been a lot of speculation as to what the targets would be. I mean, it seemed sensible that if you want to sound a warning to the country and destroy some of its defences, that government buildings, telecommunications centres, runways would be the obvious targets. The Iraqis have been aware of this, and for the previous 24 hours before the attack, a large area of the city had emptied, and a lot of the government buildings had also emptied. I saw personally 2 or 3 days ago one government building, people removing documents. They were preparing for this. So in that sense, certainly the first night's fire, which we witnessed, served the effect of sounding a warning to Saddam Hussein and his people, without inflicting too many civilian casualties. At least that's our surmise, because the Iraqis yesterday were not making any mention of numbers of civilian casualties at all, and their perception of how many of the battle in the skies was very different. We were told with glee by one border guard last night that they thought 44 American, British and other planes had been hit out of the sky. I believe they're now claiming that's gone up to 60, which is very different to the West perception of what happened.
That conversation earlier between Dan Rather and the ITN people who took those very spectacular pictures of the raid on Baghdad the other night. Well, the world goes about its business as we come into another day, 10 minutes to 5 here in New York, and about 10 minutes to 10 in London. Barry Peterson is there. Barry, what are the papers saying?
Well, I was going to tell you, Charles, folks here are starting to think about their morning tea in a little while, take a break from work, sit down with the morning newspaper. I won't surprise you, would I, if I say most of the editorials are strongly in support of what's going on in the Gulf. The Times of London also has praise for President Bush and its own new Prime Minister, John Major. It says of Mr. Bush, however, eloquence is not his greatest virtue, and made some reference to Mr. Bush's speech yesterday, adding, however, that the president found a directness that surpassed eloquence. And the editorial goes on to say, this compares with the extravagant bluster of President Saddam Hussein. It's the ordinariness of yesterday's public performances by the coalition's leaders which gave their words the power to lead. Now, there's a new English language newspaper circulating all over Europe called The European. Not surprisingly, it's also quite strongly in favor of this war. And the editorial writers there are already thinking about what comes afterward, drawing this comparison. As Germany demonstrated under the Nazis, a great people can be subverted by a greater evil. So you see the reaction so far very strongly in support of the Gulf, with some thought about what comes next.
Thank you. Barry Peterson reporting from London. Those editorials suggesting that perhaps Saddam Hussein might do what we want him to do, because nobody had ever explained it to him quite this way before.
Charlie, we have some news here, some unfortunate news. 2 more U.S. planes are confirmed down. We'll be back in a minute with more details. We have just learned that the Pentagon has confirmed that 2 more U.S. planes. We have just confirmed that the Pentagon has just confirmed that 2 more U.S. planes have been down. 2 F-15Bs strike from the Air Force. One a strike from the Air Force, the other a Navy AB intruder. Barry Peterson in London. We were just discussing a few moments ago British reaction. Now we know that the Allied losses are a little bit more than we had thought prior to this. What do you anticipate from the British?
Well, I think the British are really prepared for that. We were talking a moment ago about some of the newspaper reaction, the editorials, and I'll tell you, I think the best newspaper reaction so far can be summed up in this headline, which British citizens are buying today. It's not all over yet, and what you can't see on your screen is a little subtitle here. This is an American serviceman, and the line says, "Go get 'em." There's a clear sense here that there's a lot of support for this war, but I think perhaps more than in the United States, there's a sense here it's going to be a long war and a hard-fought war, and there's a lot of fear about those many men who may not come home.
Barry, you know, in this country, we are obsessed with this is not too strong a word, and totally justifiably so. This is on television 24 hours a day. It's the only story in the newspaper. It's all people are talking about. Are the British responding as strongly to this crisis?
Not quite as strongly, but I think you could say they're probably just as obsessed. They have 30 to 35,000 servicemen there. The British are the second largest Allied force after the Americans. And they care very, very deeply. Yes, it's on television here all the time, although sometimes there are other programs. But I think the feeling here is just as strong as it is in the United States. And it's become very personal. It's our guys, they're out there, we care about them, we're concerned about them, and we know or we fear that some of them may not come back. So the whole country has really come to rally around this war effort. Just as in the United States, where some of the voices of dissent have now joined to rally around the American effort, so too in Great Britain, those who were perhaps critical or those who opposed the war on the political front now are saying at the very least the country must get behind its men and support them until this war is over.
David Aaron is going to join us here also for a moment. David, do you think if this goes on for a long time that there's going to be more pressure in this country for our other allies to become more involved?
I wouldn't be a bit surprised. I think that there already, in the debate that took place in Congress, was a great deal of unhappiness with the level of contribution by a number of countries, certainly not Britain. But I think it's true of the Europeans, and I think the absence of any really meaningful financial contribution by the Japanese has really hit a raw nerve in Congress. So I think that there will be pressure, and I think there will even be some tensions between the United States and those countries that, in our judgment, haven't stepped up to this.
You think they might? Do you think they might increase their contribution, try to jump on this bandwagon while they still can?
Well, one would hope so. I've heard people in Congress talk about maybe we ought to put a tariff on Japanese goods to make them pay for their contribution if they won't pony up voluntarily.
Mm-hmm. And I read yesterday that the Chancellor Kohl was quoted as saying no German soldier will fight in this war, with apparently some pride. Will there be pressure for the Germans to get more involved?
Some pressure, but I think that everybody understands that there are still 350,000 Russian troops sitting now in the middle of Germany, and with all the turmoil going on in the Baltics and in the Soviet Union, maybe it would be wiser for the Germans to stay at home.
But of course, part of the reason for the pacifism in Germany and in Japan is a sort of induced pacifism. We encouraged them to that some years ago.
That's true, but there has been a very broad pacifist movement in Germany, and now that the country is unified, it has no place to go except to focus on this particular issue.
We have this new information that 2 more U.S. planes are down. Do you have a sense that we're going to be getting more and more of this as the morning wears on here? Or is this just information that we're just now getting, or do you think we're getting this in sequence, I guess is my question.
Well, I think we're obviously getting it in sequence, but I don't know what the delays are. But certainly daylight operations are far more dangerous, and it's quite clear that we're going in closer and closer to the targets to make sure we get them. I think it's important to understand that for the next 2 or 3 days, we're going to continue to keep hitting the targets we hit before to make sure we got them. And as we get in closer, of course, the small arms fire, the anti-aircraft and so forth is more effective. We have to gird ourselves for the fact that shortly we're going to probably start seeing American pilots being paraded around in Baghdad and being put on television and being humiliated and that sort of thing. That's something that the American people have to be ready for.
Yeah, thank you very much. CBS News coverage of Operation Desert Storm continues.
This is CBS. Starving Artist Group Art Expo and Sale. Thousands of beautiful original oil paintings on canvas by talented professional artists. Giant sofa-sized paintings sold elsewhere for hundreds of dollars as low as $25. Smaller paintings from $7. Absolutely positively no painting over $49. Professional artist quality at rock-bottom starving artist prices. This Sunday only in Nashville at the Marriott Hotel, I-40 at Briley Parkway, and in Murfreesboro at the Holiday Inn. This Sunday only, 11 to 4. Absolutely, positively no painting over $49.
The holidays may be gone, but there's one package being held over just for you. The Money Store Prime Package with fixed-rate home equity loans as low as prime. We're extending our holiday offer for a limited time only to help homeowners pay off credit card bills, make home improvements, anything at all. Trust the Money Store to give homeowners a prime package when they need it most. Call right now, 1-800-LOAN-YES. Program may be canceled without notice.
You're watching CBS News' continuing coverage of Showdown in the Gulf. From CBS News headquarters in New York, here are Charles Osgood and Susan Spencer.
Here are the headlines at this hour. 2 more American planes have been shot down. Israel debates a response to an Iraqi missile attack. Allied bombs continue to fall on Iraq. Jordan's forces go on high alert. This morning it is reported that 2 more U.S. warplanes have been shot down as the Persian Gulf conflict goes on. They are said to be, this time, an Air Force F-15E Eagle and a Navy A-6 Intruder. Both those planes carry 2-man crews, but their fate is not known as of this hour. Iraqi missiles slammed into Israeli coastal areas, causing some damage and at least 10 injuries. Tel Aviv was among the cities hit when at least 8 Scud missiles found their mark. They were conventional weapons. They were not armed with chemical warheads, as was feared. And now the Israeli cabinet is locked in a debate over whether to respond, and if so, how.